name is Ellie and I'm interviewing my grandmother who was born in 1960. What was your favorite game when you were a kid?
Favorite game when I was a kid? Well, outside game was probably a game called freeze tag. Do you know what that game is? You run outside, and when you tag somebody, they have to stop, and somebody else tries to unfreeze you. We played outside a lot. We played outside until the street lights went off, and then that was the signal that we had to come in. And then probably inside game, my favorite game was Monopoly. You ever play Monopoly? It's pretty fun. We would play Monopoly games in my neighborhood in somebody's basement that would go on for days or even weeks because we played so long we couldn't finish. So we would just leave the game for a while and come back and start again the next day.
What was your favorite book when you were in elementary school?
Probably had two. One was Charlotte's Web. That was the first book I remember a teacher reading to us at story time when we'd come back from lunch every day. Loved that story. I loved Fern. I could identify with her in the way she wanted to save Wilbur because I loved animals and I always wanted to save things. And then my next book I liked was The Miracle Worker, and it was the story of Helen Keller, and it was her teacher, and her name was Annie Sullivan, but she called her teacher, and she was blind, she couldn't speak or couldn't hear and couldn't see. And it was amazing that this one lady came into her life and taught her how to do sign language, gave her an alphabet so that she could talk to her family and understand things. And she went on to go to college one day, grew up and was very successful because of this one person. So I kind of like that. The similarities with them were Fern was like saving Wilbur, and Annie saved Helen. So I think I always liked people who were kind of heroes.
What did you like the best when you were my age?
Oh my goodness, what food did I like the best? That's hard because my mother was an unbelievable cook. I would say probably her fried chicken. She cooked it in this big iron skillet, and it had the crust was so good, not too thick, but the perfect crispness, and it was all tender inside. I loved it. And then she made macaroni and cheese, cream potatoes. And I remember the pot she made the cream potatoes in. That was a delicious meal. Everything she made was good, but that's probably my favorite.
What was your favorite subject in school when you were in my grade?
I would say it would be reading. I love to read, and we did all kinds of great things. We had little groups, reading circles, and we read with different groups, read different books that we'd read together, and then we'd write in journals about them, what we liked about them, that kind of things. I loved reading.
What were schools like?
Schools were, we went to elementary school up through kindergarten through 6th grade, and then we went to junior high and high school from 7th to 12th grade. So you went to two schools close to your neighborhood. But when I first started to school, we didn't go to school with anybody except kids of our own race. Only white kids were at my school. We didn't know any kids, any African Americans or anybody that was not a white kid. We didn't know them. So when I was in the 5th grade, they came down with some rulings and some judgments and said that they wanted to integrate schools, meaning to put the kids together. So starting in the 6th grade, I started going to school with kids that were different colors. It took a few years for everybody to kind of get used to that, but after a few years, everybody realized that all the things we kind of worried about before that wasn't really anything to worry about. We were all kind of the same inside, even though we might look different on the outside. I had lots of friends I had black friends and friends that were Asian, friends that I'd never had a chance to meet before we started going to school together. So it was pretty cool, but that was a big change. Can you imagine going to school where you saw only kids that looked like you? It'd be really different because you've never been to school like that. You've always been used to coming to school where everybody was just whoever lived in your neighborhood went to the same school. We didn't have that. So it was kind of neat. It's neat that that we did that and we all got together.
Did you work as a child or teenager?
I did. My first job was when I was 16 years old, and I worked at Opryland, and that was a big amusement park in Nashville. A great amusement park that was really highly visited by people all over the world. Celebrities came there. People came from other countries to go visit Opryland. It was really cool. And I was what they called an area hostess, and that was a fancy word for a sweeper. And you come in every day and you go check in and get your uniform. They'd give you your broom, your dustpan, and my job the whole day for a 10-hour shift was to walk around and sweep up anything that was on the ground. And it would get so hot. It was summertime. It'd be like 100 degrees, and you'd stand outside all day. It was a hard job. But it was fun because you got to talk to people from everywhere, and they all thought you were an expert on Nashville or country music, and you try to tell them things about your city. And then at night, this is really cool. At night after the park would close at 10 o'clock, they used to let us have like parties, get-togethers for all the workers, and we would ride the rides, rock and roller coaster, and the flume zoom, and the bumper cars. We would get on all these rides and ride them, and they'd just keep doing it late into the night. And we had so much fun. I met a lot of fun people there, and we enjoyed that. That's a happy memory.
What happened to Opryland?
Well, it was a great park, but it did get flooded a couple of times. The Cumberland River flooded it. And so I don't really know what happened, but I guess the investors weren't happy with their, the money they were making there anymore, so they closed it down. And we were so sad because we had season passes and we couldn't go there anymore. But now they built Opry Mills. Have you ever heard of Opry Mills? You ever been there? Rainforest Cafe and all the stores and everything there? That's where the old Opryland used to be. So see, we've been to the same places, but it's just called Opry Mills now, and it was Opryland then. And I think it flooded. Remember when that flooded a couple years ago? And all those stores.
What was your house like?
Okay, you said before, I was born in 1960, so that was a long time ago. Our houses were different than they are now. We had like ranch-style houses. They were like one floor usually, or if they had another floor, it would be a basement. It wouldn't be an upstairs. You'd go down into the basement. So we just had, not a lot of space. We usually, I had two sisters. I shared a room with one of my sisters. They were pretty small rooms. We had one bathroom for a long time until probably my sister was like 15 or 16, and they built another bathroom in the basement. So you can imagine all sharing one bathroom, trying to get ready to go somewhere. The houses were kind of small. The houses were close together. Lots of kids in the neighborhood, so we had a good time doing all that. On television, this was kind of a different thing than what you're used to. We had 3 channels, and that's all we got to watch. And so that's why we didn't watch TV too much. We played outside so much because there was really nothing much on television. So there were no electronics, no computers, no iPads, anything like that. We had records to play that were about this big records that we play on record players. And that's how we listened to music. So it was kind of different, but it was fun. We found a way to have a good time.
When you were a kid?
There was a war going on in the 60s and early 70s. It's called Vietnam War. Have you ever heard of that?
Yep.
You ever heard of it? Lots and lots of young boys. They had the draft, something called the draft, because they didn't have enough boys to go and join the army just on their own. So they would send you something in the mail, and they would tell you that you were supposed to report for duty. So once you were 18 years old, you might have to go and be in the war and go to Vietnam. Thousands and thousands of young soldiers died in Vietnam, which is a long way away across the whole earth to the other side, and they went there and fought, and we lost a lot of them, and they put their names in the paper. So every day when you would get up, you'd open the newspaper up, and sometimes it would be names on 2 whole pages of paper of soldiers they were called MIAs or POWs. They were prisoners of war, but they'd been captured, so they couldn't come home. They were keeping them there, or they were missing in action, or they had been killed in service. So almost every kid I knew had a family member that they lost somebody in that war, or they knew somebody, or my sister was 4 years older than me, so she was in high school. Lots of her friends, right, that graduated ahead of her, went to that war and died. And it went on many years. I think it was about 66 to probably about 72 or 73, so it was a pretty long war. And it was really never resolved. We never really won it. So it was kind of an unsatisfying war. It wasn't like we were really felt like at the end of it that all those people had really died for a good reason, and it was kind of a controversial war. A lot of people in America were against it, didn't like that war, and they spoke out against it, especially in colleges and things. The young people were saying no to the war, and it was a kind of a troubled time in the country. At that time, it was different than, like World War II, when everybody was behind it. We were fighting to save America and all those kinds of things. So that was kind of a new thing.
Were there any cool inventions?
There were some cool inventions. Like how do you get your hair dry? In the mornings or after you take a shower?
Sometimes I use a hairdryer.
Sometimes
I just leave it.
Do you know that when I was a little girl, there were no such thing as hair dryers, like blow dryers like that? We had these caps that you put on your head, and they were hooked into a long hose, and it was a big apparatus, and you'd turn it on, and it would dry your hair, puff it out into a big ball and dry your hair inside this big bag. So you had to wait like 2 hours to get your hair dry. You have to roll it up and wait. So when those hair dryers came out, I was about 13 years old, and I loved those. That was a really cool invention. Here's another invention. There was no such thing as a microwave oven. Can you imagine? Nothing like that. If you wanted to cook something, you had to put it on the stove or cook it inside the stove. There was no quick food that you could make like that. Even the grocery stores didn't have any of these things. No packages with like a sandwich already made or a dinner that was already done and you could just put it in the microwave and heat it up. Your mom had to like come home and cook a whole meal. You know, it took a long time. Seat belts were a new invention when I was a kid. There were no seat belts.
Awesome.
No, it wasn't. You used to ride in the car and you'd ride up in the back window, and when your mom put her foot on the brake, you'd fall out and hit the back of the seat. That's how you knew that your mom was going too fast or that you weren't in a good spot. So it was kind of dangerous in cars, but there also weren't many interstates, so the cars didn't go that fast because we went on all these little back roads everywhere, so it didn't seem quite as dangerous as it does now. So there were cars were different. What else? Everything you did, Ellie, everything you did when I was your age was real close to your house. Your school was just a few miles from your house. Your church would be right there. Usually your parents worked pretty close around in your neighborhood. Now everybody's really spread out. Probably all your family lived pretty close by. People are real spread out now. People work, they drive like an hour away and they don't think anything about it. Your dad drives about that far, doesn't he? And he doesn't think a thing about that. But when I was a kid, it didn't happen. You knew everybody in your neighborhood. And here's one more. We went to gas stations. How does your mom put gas in the car?
With a hose?
She just goes to the pump and does it with her own hand, right? They didn't do that when I was a kid. You had a little man that came out of the little gas station and he would wipe your windshield off. He'd spray it and wipe it for you. He'd put your gas in the car. He'd check the fluid under your hood. He'd check the pressure in your tires. We knew his name. His name was Clyde. We went to the same gas station and he would come out and he would say, guess what he'd say? Good morning, Miss Eloise. $1 worth of regular. We put $1 worth of gas in our car. How much money does your mom put in her car now?
$1.
$60, $70, fill her tank up?
Yeah.
If you put $1 worth of gas in your car now, you couldn't drive a mile down the road because gas is so much higher now. It takes so much more. So we had a lot of things that were different. Does that sound like something that's foreign to you? Nothing like what you're used to? Can you imagine going to a gas station like that where the guy comes out and does all the work for you? Cleans your windshield?
One final question. When you were a kid, was there anything different from now?
Yeah, there were a lot of things different, like the things we talked about. I think one thing that's changed I'm kind of sad for kids now is I don't think a lot of families are as close maybe now as they were back when I was a kid, like with your extended family, grandparents and cousins. We all kind of were together more. And I think because of all the inventions, the things we were talking about, the iPads, electronics, and everybody's got a TV, and you might even have a TV in your own bedroom, families are kind of move apart from each other, and everybody kind of does their own thing. And when I was a kid, we sat down around one table every night. We had dinner together. We talked about our day. We went to church together on Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night. We did a lot of things for other families too. We reached out to other people. We went to the blind home. We would go to the children's home, the orphanage, and we'd take cards and we'd make things for them, and we'd bring a kid to our house on a holiday that didn't have a family. I just think sometimes now families don't do as much of that. They kind of just do their own thing sometimes, and they're not really as close, and they don't look out for other people as much as maybe we did. But that's just kind of my perspective. I see a lot of kids, and I think a lot of kids are missing out on some of those things, having those close family ties. But I'm glad you have those.
Thank you.
Thank you for asking me all those questions. That took me on a little walk down memory lane. I enjoyed it.